share the screen and
Yeah, go ahead. I will go ahead and kick things off. So, thank you everyone for joining us this evening for the Out of the Woods Growing Profit or Growing Income from Your Forest webinar series. My name is Lindsay Kazarek, and I will be your host for this evening. I am joined by Sarah Collins Smith, Program Manager for the Appalachian Program here at Future Generations University. And our guest speaker for tonight is Adam Taylor. Adam joins us from Virginia Tech. Adam Taylor oversees the 377-acre Virginia Tech Catawba Sustainability Center and its vital partnerships and projects with the community, university faculty, and others. He came to Virginia Tech in 2016 from the West Virginia Farmers Market Association, a statewide organization right here in West Virginia, where he worked to support and grow West Virginia's local food economy through project development and management, stakeholder outreach, and policy change. Adam Taylor also carried out a 2-year assignment with the Peace Corps as a forestry extension agent in Zambia and a year-long internship on author Barbara Kingsolver's 100-plus acre organic farm highlighted in the book Animal Vegetable Miracle, A Year of Food Life. A native of Tazewell County, Virginia, Taylor earned his bachelor's degree in environmental studies from Emory and Henry College in 2008 and a master's degree in agriculture from Oklahoma State in 2014. So a few housekeeping items before I turn things over to Adam. If you have questions or anything to contribute to the conversation during the presentation, please feel free to do so via the chat or the Q&A boxes that you can find at the bottom of your screen. If the questions are pretty time sensitive to the presentation, we'll get those to Adam during the presentation, but if not, we will answer those during our Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Again, thank you so much for being here this evening with us, and I will turn things over to Adam.
awesome. Well, thank you, Lindsay. And I am super excited to be talking with y'all's series with Future Generations. So yeah, I'm Adam Taylor and I run this farm for Virginia Tech. We're a pretty different type of farm, as you would expect from a state university. We're not in a college of agriculture. We're in the Office of Engagement. So a lot of what we do is how we're engaging with the public. And then we're trying to put research demonstration plots on top of that. So we have a community component that a lot of other university-sponsored research farms don't have. And yeah, I'll get into a lot of that. It makes us pretty unique. But I should mention that even though we were at Virginia Tech, we are also supported by the County of Roanoke in Virginia, where we are. And we work on a lot of economic development kind of stuff for rural landscapes, which we'll talk about. This is our farm. This is a map of it, and you can see that, it's all broken up into a lot of different sections. It's 378 acres. Primarily, we are an agroforestry demonstration farm. So, of all the agroforestry practices that are able to happen within our temperate climate, we do all of them but one, which is windbreak is the only one that we are lacking, and I'll get into that. But as you can see through how everything's kind of divided on the map here, we have a lot of different stuff going on. We also have a partnership kind of with the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. The Appalachian Trail runs around our farm on 3 mountains, which in Virginia we call the Virginia's Triple Crown. And then we have a walking trail through the farm to support people, trying to access that. Something on the map that I probably won't hit on too much is we have an American chestnut breeding orchard that people are interested in, where we back cross American chestnut trees with a Chinese chestnut for a 15/16 match to see if we can bring that giant of the mountain back. But yeah, I'll just get into everything, and I'm happy to field questions as we're going, if that's all right. You guys just let me know. So like I said, we work on agroforestry mostly, and if no one's familiar with agroforestry, it's sort of how we blend trees and or shrubs with crops and or livestock. And that can happen in the open fields, which we'll have some examples of, but it can also happen in the forest, which I think is maybe y'all's focused on, more of the forest farming things where we're using the forest to grow crops in the understory. So one of the first things we ever did at the farm was focus on riparian zones. And, riparian zones are very important to the waterways. It's that last line of defense before any runoff is coming into the creek. And so we developed a kind of an idea of multifunctional zones. So say you're a cattle farmer who is using the creek to water your cattle. And so those cattle are coming in there and they're, going down into the creek bed. It's 1,200-pound animals, so they're, mucking things up. They're creating a lot of soil erosion. They are, pooping and peeing within the creek. That's creating bad water quality for everyone downstream. And for where we're at in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, it's pretty important on how we collect, how we protect our waters. And so riparian buffers, if you're unfamiliar, is just, planting trees at a set width off the bank. The root systems go down to kind of hold the soil in place. The canopy comes up over the water to kind of lower the temperature of the water, raising oxidation, allowing more biological life to thrive within that water. And it's a pretty common practice among cost share programs like Natural Resource Conservation Services. In Virginia, we have something called the Soil and Water Conservation District that will support those systems by fencing cattle or other livestock out of the creek, and then paying you to put trees on the creek to kind of achieve that conservation purpose. But for us, we thought, we can push this a little bit better. The NRCS USDA standard is 35 foot off either side of the embankment. But the landscape doesn't really work on just set parameters. You have to look at it, you have to be there, you have to observe it, you have to see that water is coming into other places. And so, we've developed models of variable width buffers, as well as thinking about when you take 35 foot on either side of the stream bank out of production for a grazing animal, depending on the size of the farm, that can be a significant amount of acreage that you've lost in grassland. And so can we put something else in there that could also potentially be profit generating? And so that's kind of what we've done here with these multifunctional zones. So here's an example of one of our variable width buffers at Catawba. You can see by the mode path here on the right that we've come out very far and then come right back in. So in this particular area, we were able to determine that a lot of water was collecting in this area. So in a flood event, water was standing here. And so we probably need more roots in the ground than we do in other places of the farm. So we brought that buffer out to about 95 feet. And then as you see this path here, if you're following my mouse, we go back and then you can see the tubes kind of out here. And we're, a little over 30 feet there. So not quite at the standard of the USDA. And so that's us working with the landscape to say we need more roots in the ground in a more flood-prone area and less in a not flood-prone area to maximize our landscape. In the trees selection that we chose, you can see some of them in the picture. I see serviceberry, I see slippery elm, I see persimmons, I see mulberries. These are all native fruit and nut producing trees that you could, harvest something from and also, capitalize on. If you're not interested in that, these are also great trees for, bird life, wildlife, things like that. So they're not just like, let's put pine, let's put oak, let's, put hickories. Those are often slow growing trees. But we can, achieve our conservation goal a little faster with some faster growing trees that also are going to generate us some income if we choose. Here's another example. This one we call the community food forest example. And so we keep it mowed down, but we still have a good number of trees, and we're going way far out on this one at like 120 feet or more. And these are all, native fruit, nut, and medicine producing trees. So in this buffer, persimmons, black walnuts, witch hazel, pawpaws, serviceberry, elderberry, and that might be it. I think some American plum within there too. So, when we think about riparian buffers, this is the Catawba Sustainability Center in 2009 when it like, kind of first started, and we had no trees here. You can see that the grass is going right up to the creek. You can see, like in here, head cuts we would call, from, previous operations of cattle using this stream and going down and, eroding the stream bed and drinking from it. But then over time, we plant some trees, it starts to regenerate a bit. We can start seeing some willows, some sycamores, things like that coming in. And then this is where we are today. So we're getting complete conservation coverage on both sides of the stream bank, and we are getting close to reaching that apex sort of canopy closure over the creek to give us a better temperature value within the water itself. And to the point of today, years ago, we would not be able to do fish studies in this creek, but now, based on our riparian buffer work, we're actually studying the habitats of blue chub fish within the creek and counting the number of nests that they build and what their population is. And so, when you think about riparian buffers, this is, in my mind, the way to do it, to not just focus on set widths, tree selection that is given to you on a list. How are you maximizing that landscape? So another agroforestry practice that we work on is what we call CCAP, conservation credit agroforestry production. And so this is kind of using native fruit and nut trees in a different kind of system to not only take up nutrient runoff, but also produce products of pawpaws, persimmons, American plums, shagbark hickories, mulberries, chestnuts, hazelnuts. That might be all of those. But we used a permaculture design kind of system on this to be what we were calling like a first line of defense on water quality. So the hillside here is what we're going to focus on. These are what we're calling our swell systems. And so as water falls off of this uh, uh, field up north, then we have a dam here that directs the water, through a series of berms, and and in those berms is trees that are uptaking that water. So any nutrient runoff, maybe we graze cattle up here, so like any kind of fecal matter that's coming through the water system is going to go through the system and be uptaken by trees first before it comes across a clear field and then hits our buffer and then hits the creek. And so in this particular instance, we were focusing on phosphorus uptake and how many tons of phosphorus per acre were we uptaking per stems of trees per acre. And I think we came to the conclusion of around 3 tons of phosphorus was uptaken per acre as it came through this hillside planting and back down to the buffers and then into the creek. So this is kind of what it looked like in real time. This is when I first, made the swale system. It's about 7 acres. And then, yeah, in these areas between, you can see the berm, and then trees were planted in there. And then as we move forward, now it's a functioning system. And not only are we working on, the trees with the fruits and nuts that they're producing and the nutrient uptake, but we're able to bale hay, small square bales in between the rows there. And yeah, my rake barely fits in between the rows, but it does fit, and then we're able to utilize it for some square bale production. That's also mixed with a lot of like nitrogen fixing trees, shrubs within, like false indigo and smooth alder. And through that, we're kind of minimizing our need for, synthetic fertilization. We're not even using it at all. So we're relying on the tree leaf themselves to drop detritus for soil nutrient building, as well as the nitrogen fixing shrubs that are hedged within the trees to fix the nitrogen and give the grass hay the nutrients it needs so that we're not dependent on outside inputs. So forest farming is another thing, and from when I looked on the website and the series, I understand that you've probably had a bit of forest farming, so I won't go too much into it. How we look at it is that, we have our back 40, our back 80. For us, it's a back 80 that's in forest. And how are we maximizing, maybe our income as a model on the forested acres? And so for us, what we're doing is growing, non-timber forest products, woodland medicinals, ginseng, golden seal, black and blue cohosh, Solomon seal, bloodroot, and some we've had a little bit of success with some false unicorn root. And so in addition to that, we look at some of the other, edibles, so mushrooms, ramps, things like that. And all of it just to kind of, maximize our efforts in the woodland areas. And we also are supporting some tools that are coming out of Virginia Tech, one in particular known as Plant Shoe. So there's plantshoe.com, which is a program Virginia Tech has developed that you can, go to plantshoe.com, you can type in your address, it'll pull up a plat of your farm. You can draw lines around, your wooded acres, and then within, 5 minutes, it'll submit you a report on what non-timber forest products might grow best in what areas of your property. And so we were the ground truth for that program when it first came out. And so, we put ramps in, ginseng, golden seal, bloodroot, everything that, all of the ones I mentioned. And it gave us, planting recommendations based on orientation, based on canopy size, on where those things might do the best. And so in the early days of the developing of that tool, we ground truthed it at Catawba and found that maybe it was, 50 to 60 feet off, and we were able to tweak it, and now it's doing pretty good. And so, we have a thriving population of a lot of different species in bigger kind of plots out in the woods. We're also doing some, simulations under artificial shade in raised beds with a soil mix that we've, made ourselves. And we're looking at, can we grow a ramp faster that way? Can we grow golden seal faster that way? And, what we found out is, ramps not so much, from seed. They still need that scarification process. They're going to do just as well out in the woods as they are in like a controlled environment. But on things like golden seal, yeah, we're getting a better growth rate in the first year. So we're putting a lot of our golden seal rhizomes in raised beds, letting them sit there for a year and then pulling them out and transplanting them into the woods after. And so we're seeing a significant growth in those. Ginseng, kind of the same, but we're using it more on a 5-year program than a 1-year program. The roots are growing more like carrots and not the nice, squiggly, messed up kind of roots that are marketable. But we're still growing them out a little faster. And in about a 5-year program, we have really nice transplantable ginseng that we can take into the woods. So that's sort of some of the things that we're doing. We've messed with tools. So we found a ginseng seed planter from China that's planting like 3 seeds a minute, as you push it down. And we've used a lot of that and tried to push it out into the woods. And we're just growing as many things as we can for the whole purpose of planting stock. So one of the things in this realm that we've kind of encountered as a challenge is that folks that are interested in planting these things are not finding, adequate planting stock to get started. So everything that we plant, we do not harvest to be processed or send out. everything that we harvest is harvested to then be sent to other farms to start propagation there for their own individual businesses. And we've coupled that with a few things. We had a grant program a little while back focusing on this, where we were able to do a number of educational series. People would come, they'd learn about ramps, they'd learn about golden seal, they'd learn about cohosh. We'd go in the woods with them. We'd, either wild harvest and recraft some of those, especially on black cohosh. That was something we did. Golden seal, we showed how to plant it. Ramps, the same. And then at the end of the day, you would take home some root stock to take home and plant. And that worked really well through that grant period. And at this point, any locals that are near us, we're working with them to put more planting stock on their acres, as well as working with the Cherokee Nation in North Carolina. And a lot of the golden seal and black cohosh that we harvest is actually going to them to repopulate their woods upon the reservation in Western North Carolina. So we'll move on to the next agroforestry plot, alley cropping. If you're not familiar with alley cropping, it's how we use trees as soil building agents to grow crops in between. And we're using that in a lot of different ways. This was a new project for us. We're only in our second season with it. So we're still kind of, iron out some of the details and everything on how we do it. But we did split the field that we use that you see here into an A and B. So an A section, we're looking at more of like a small scale. It's only 2 acres. So, we're looking at, can you do, different types of maybe intense vegetables? I think you could do on two acres. We're doing corn and winter squash is ours. And then in B, we're looking at a larger acreage system. It's 7 acres, and we're planting alfalfa on that to bale. And so, how are we benefiting the farm? We're creating a multi-purpose layer. There's a lot of things going on there. Of course, we're trying to demonstrate. And, how do we feel that the trees are affecting everything? We're building soil health. We're growing fodder, forage, and feed for livestock, human food. And then we're creating a system that is, less dependent on, outside inputs, generating its own for the soil fertility that we need to create a crop. So yeah, site A, as I mentioned, it's only 2 acres. It's long and narrow. Of course, all the soils out here were pretty poor. It was an area that had been mined for hay exclusively for about 10 years with nothing introduced other than like synthetic fertilizers. And so in there we did honey locust, mulberry, comfrey, false indigo, blueberries, and then our crops were corn and squash. And then on site B, 7 acres, we made it a lot wider. Again, poor soil. We added a tulip poplar to the mix because, that would probably be good when we introduce livestock, and then we're planting alfalfa. So our spacing is different on each one because our context is different on each one. So on site A, we have 50-foot alleys. That pretty much is based on a 10-foot seed drill that we use to plant everything that goes through there. So in 50 foot, we make 5 passes and we're not overstacking. And then 20 to 25-foot tree spacings. And then I always love a big turnaround for the equipment, so you don't end up backing up a lot. It makes it a lot easier. On site B, we widen those out to 70 foot. That was based on a 35-foot hay rake. That's going to be raking up the alfalfa, same tree spacing, same turnarounds. And then, here's our plants, comfrey, 3-foot spacing, mulberries at 28 feet, poplars at 40 feet, honey locust at 28, blueberries at 4. And then these are seed rates, for the crops that we're putting in. If anyone's an alfalfa farmer on the webinar, you'll notice I went very heavy on my seed rate, only because we had a healthy population of Johnson grass within there. And so in order for us to deal with that, we needed to kind of outcompete it. And then we're not big proponents of sprays and fertilizers and stuff like that. So we're trying to maybe work naturally over a 5 to 10 year period of weaning ourselves off those things because the land has become dependent on them, to make a natural system. So I went double the seed rate on alfalfa that you normally would. And I also didn't plant one species of alfalfa. I planted about 7 different species. So when you're turning a hayfield into a crop field, there's a lot of things that you can consider. There's 2 ways to do it. Um, Number one that I chose was a chemical burn. So I'm going to use that tool that's in my toolbox, with the idea that eventually I'm going to not use that tool. And so that's what I did. I sprayed it with glyphosate. I came in and I seed drilled cover crop into it just to prep the land before we even planted any trees. I felt that to be less intrusive as like a complete plow or disc or till kind of scenario. I felt it was like keeping the soil more in place. It was promoting, more of the biological activity that might be there without exposing it and turning it over, exposing it to, wind, water erosion that might happen. So I found the chemical burn with the no-till system to be a little less evil. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So this system was a different kind of tree planting than we've ever done at Catawba. Most of the times we will plant, smaller saplings, maybe 2 to 3 years old. But giving the funding from the Edwards Mother Earth Foundation, we were able to purchase 5 to 6 year old trees, and had huge root balls on them. So these trees, weighed about 250 pounds each. And there's some of them. There's the false indigo on the right within the pots. And yeah, we had to use equipment and trailers and tractors and everything to kind of load them and handle them. But in the end, I feel like it paid off. So, we had a series of planting days. We had some Virginia Tech students come out and help. We did it on Earth Day, which was nice. But here's the list of everything we planted. 66 honey locusts, 28 mulberry, 8 tulip poplar, 180 false indigo, 136 blueberries, and 401 comfreys over 9 acres. And so we had to get inventive on how we planted them. And the best way I came up with was, using an excavator. So we were able to, tie a rope to the boom of the excavator, move the trees easily that way. And by the time we, got it all the systems figured out, I was able to plant a tree of that size with the excavator in less than 5 minutes, and only get off the machine once. If I had a helper, I did a lot of it by myself, but if I had a helper, I could, do it in less significant time and didn't even have to get off the machine. And so, yeah, here's some of the trees going in. How we laid them out, came back and planted them. And a year later, this is where we're at. So the picture on the left is our newly crimped cover crop. It was a fall cover crop that I crimped down, no-till seeded into, a summer cover crop, a corn, and a winter squash. And that's our kind of rotation. 3 crop rotation. So we take one of the alleys and we rest it and put a summer annual type cover crop in. This year I used a 7 species mix of 3 types of Sudan grasses, a pearl millet, sunflower, daikon radish, a cowpea, and probably a few other things that I'm leaving out. And then the picture on the bottom right, that's our first alfalfa cutting. So I seeded the alfalfa last fall. We let it grow through the winter, and then this spring we had our first alfalfa cutting, and we're about to have another one probably next month. In full transparency, in the first year of this system, like I failed 100%. Yeah, our winter squash got eaten by deer. I've never seen deer eat winter squash ever, but they ate it down. And then the Johnson grass just kind of took over a lot of the corn and the winter squash, and we were fighting it pretty hard for a couple months, and then it just got to the point where it wasn't worth it anymore. And so we ended up mowing the field. We put it back in a winter cover crop, and then that's what you see here on the left that's being crimped down. And then we'll see what happens this year. seems a little better. We've been really dry, as I'm sure most of you guys are. So these are all rain fed. We have no irrigation at all on it. It's dry farming 100%. So we'll see what happens. It's been pretty bad summer so far. And then we'll move into, I think this is our last agroforestry example is silvopasture. And so, yeah, if you're familiar with silvopasture, it's growing trees that provide shade that we graze livestock underneath. And a few years ago, there was a drawdown study that said these are 100 things that we can do today to slow climate change. Of the top 10, 3 of them were related to our food system, and number 9 was silvopasture. So there's a lot of good benefits that we're getting there. Not only are we, growing trees in the field and the leaves are breaking down things, as we incorporate livestock into that, there's a lot of benefits for the livestock. So like number one is like forages off of them. So different tree species in ours, black locust, black walnut, tulip poplar, white pine, shortleaf pine. Those are all things that they're eating. They're eating the leaves off of that. Other ones are protection trees, like we have a pitch lob hybrid, which is a hybrid between a pitch pine and a loblolly. So, and then we have bald cypress that's giving them protection from wind and things in an upland planting. Northern red oak is also, they're eating acorns off of that. Also a high-end timber tree. So we're kind of layering the enterprises. So there's high-end timber trees with other trees that are providing shade. And so we run a majority of black Angus cattle. And so those cattle, we know that they start experiencing heat stress in temperatures above 80 degrees without adequate access to shade. And so within our 50-foot center plantings, as the tree reaches maturity at 25 to 35 feet, we're seeing shade in a north to south oriented planting, covering one side of the alley and the other as the sun moves. And so they're getting a lot of shade. That shade also coupled with cool season forages. So your cool season forages are like your Kentucky Fescue 31, your orchard grass, your clovers, your timothy. All those things thrive in a cooler environment. So access to shade on those forages are actually slowing the growth of the forage and compounding phytonutrients within the grass to make them more nutrient for the cattle when they eat them. And then on top of that, we're also, sequestering carbon within the ground. We're also creating more of a mycorrhizal fungi population within the ground for building our soils. So in my experiences with the silvopasture, it's one of the best things that a livestock farmer can do. It takes a long time for it to establish, but once it does, I've fought this thing for 7, 8 years before we were able to introduce cattle. But the effects once we did have been like insane. Our recovery rate on our grass in there is double what it is everywhere else. We're getting an extra graze on the silvopasture paddock of 10 acres. We're getting extra graze that we don't get anywhere else on the 378 acres that we get here in the silvopasture. So hope that wasn't too much. I was just excited about silvopasture. So that's all the agroforestry sort of practices that we do here. But then, if you're going to be an agroforestry farm, you always have to question yourself on how are you putting the agro in agroforestry. And so we saw a bit of that with the alley cropping on how we're growing heirloom dent, meal corn, heirloom varieties of winter squash. We're growing alfalfa to feed back to our cows. But our cows are really the driving force of like the soil nutrient, the maximizing of the landscape, and what they do on the farm is the most important part in my mind. Yes, the trees are supporting them. The trees are supporting ecosystem services that are benefiting the whole system. But the cattle are the ones that are trampling, they're pooping, they're peeing, they're eating. They are causing impacts that are like making the soil respond by building more organic matter, by building soil aggregates, by encouraging biological life within the soil that is encouraging plant biodiversity, which is encouraging insect biodiversity, which is encouraging bird biodiversity. It just goes on and on. And in the last 5 to 6 years, I've really dove into we can create a landscape, but that landscape being managed with livestock is essential to kind of building our soils, sequestering carbon, and creating a better environment in which we live. And so a few years ago, I came up with this thing called the Grass-Fed Beef Partnership. And it's a little bit of a complicated situation in which we function to have livestock on the farm. We don't have, like, I love cows and I'm really interested in cows and they like warm my heart and I'm very excited to work with them. But essentially, they're just a tool that I'm using on the farm. They are, I'm growing grass as a crop. They are harvesting that crop and then I'm moving them on and I'm using them where they need to be used. I'm not focused on their names. I'm not focused on, this one's sweet. They're a tool on the landscape. I would rather harvest grass with a cow's mouth than I would with a hay bar or a baler, because the effects that they cause is just all in the positive if they're managed correctly. So, part of our grass-fed beef partnership, what we do is we buy wean steers and replacement heifers from local cow-calf producers. And so, in West Virginia, you guys are probably mostly cow-calf producers. So we pay a premium if you're a cow-calf producer that is maybe producing how we graze, in an intensive adaptive management style. If you're doing a stream exclusion and not letting your cattle drink from the waterway, we're going to pay you more for your steers. So 5 to 10 cents more, depending on market value, we'll pay you to bring them to our farm. And then we run them through our system, 18, 22 months sometimes, depending on harvest dates and things like that. And then we process them at the end with a local USDA inspected facility, and then we distribute to the community at large. And so while they're there, we have kind of a research component. We're looking at forage quality. We're looking at their average weight gain. We're looking at, how the water retention rates within the soil are changing. We're looking at temperatures from paddocks that they were at to paddocks they weren't at, all to try to encourage biological life within the soil. And so, yeah, it's kind of this three-part type project where rural economic development, where we're taking regular cow-calf producers and paying them premiums for their management style. They should not get the same rate if you're doing something better than someone who doesn't do anything at all and actually harms the natural world. And they're they sell at the sell barns, they're getting the same price. So if you're stream exclusion and rotationally grazing, we're going to pay you extra. Research component, we're putting them on our farm, we're monitoring them, we're looking at them, we're seeing, does management of cattle within this intensive adaptive grazing system, translate to a better quality grass finished beef. And that's our main focus. And then community development. We're sending them out in the community. I'll talk a little bit about like a nonprofit we work with to put some of our nutrient dense grass finished beef into low income neighborhoods. But we're also like encouraging, local people to know what it's like to buy a quarter beef, buy a half beef, buy a whole beef, and buy it from a farmer and not buy beef at the grocery store when we have so many cattle producers within the area. So we're mainly focused on three different systems. So on the top left, you'll see as a silvopasture system that we talked about. On the bottom left is an open range. I call it open range, even though we're not in Montana or Wyoming. It's still open range cool season forage. And then on the right here is a native warm season grasses forage. So in the silvopasture, we talked about it a bit. They have continuous access to shade while they're there. So that makes a huge difference for cows that are mostly black. They don't want to get hot. They're looking for shade. But when you have evenly distributed shade and not just one tree in a field, but you have 200 trees in a field, they're going to spread out. They're going to move away from kind of that herd mentality, and they're going to get up and graze more during the day. So in the open fields, what we find is that they're going to, get up early in the morning while it's still cool. They're going to feel as much grass in their rumen as possible. And then as they start to ruminate and chew their cud, they're going to sit under a shade tree. And that's where they'll be till it cools off again in the evening. But in the silvopasture, they're getting up and grazing 3 and 4 times a day. And so that's, kind of moving toward more weight gain, more exercise, and a better overall, quality of life really for the cow. And one of the funny things I like to point out here on the left side, these are some tulip poplar trees. And as we talk about agroforestry and we talk about growing trees in pastures. And what happens, there's so much sunlight for a tree. It's like, I'll put a branch here, I'm going to put a branch there, a branch here. And so they over time don't become such quality timber trees, as a tulip poplar, as an oak, as a black walnut would be. But you can see here how the cows rub on the sides and they actually prune the trees themselves as they go through. Here's some honey, here's some black locust, and here's some tulip poplar next to some bald cypress. And then here's our open range. It's cool season forages. We're leaving them on, smaller paddocks 2 to 3 days, really, before they're moved on. That does a lot of different things for us. They're having a heavy impact on a small area, but then they're moved on. So they're getting fresh forage, that's available to them every, 2 to 3 days. 2 to 3 days is about the gestation period of parasites. So as they might be ingesting parasites as the grass gets lower, we move them off to higher grass. And so, we're kind of breaking up the life cycle of parasites. So we've, eliminated our need to add wormer to our cattle. We're also not allowing the fly eggs within the patties to, go through their gestation. So we're eliminating a lot of our pink eye that we have. Like I haven't had pink eye in these cattle in, 3 years or better. And then we, overall encouraging better growth rate of the grasses. One of the best examples I can give you on why this is so important has came within the last 2 weeks. We were on native warm season grasses, but we haven't had a rain since early June. And I talked to conventional farmers in the area, and they're saying like next week I'm going to be feeding hay if we don't get some significant rain. But because of the way we managed and because of the water retention that we have, I turned our cows into a paddock today that hasn't seen rain in a month, and the grass within it is just a cool season grass, as green as can be in the understory. We left a good armor of plant matter on top of the soil to keep it cool, to retain any water, dew, things that come through, and they are just doing just fine. And I'm not worried about, do I need to feed hay next week? I probably can make it another 2 months, a month and a half or something if it doesn't rain. So that's a beautiful part of like this grazing system within cool season forages. And here's our warm native season forages. If you're not familiar with those, this is going to be big blue stem Indian grass, switchgrass, Eastern gamma grass, and a lot of different native forbs like Mexican hat, black-eyed Susan, fleabanes, things like that. Milkweed we have in there. But this grass is evolved over thousands of years to be the most nutritious at the hottest, driest time of year. And that's exactly what we've seen. These pictures that I'm not this one on the left, but these two are just from 2 weeks ago. If you haven't had rain like we haven't, these grasses are doing fine. The root systems go down, can go down, as much as 8 to 10, 12 feet. And so they're accessing water way lower than any other grass is. It's the grass that was here before Europeans like myself came here, before the white man. These were the grasses that were there. and the buffalo, even in places, even in West Virginia, we had buffalo, we had elk, long ago, and they were driven by, wolves to eat here and move along, and then give that place where they ate a long rest period before they came back. And that's how we kind of built our soils in this nation. And we're kind of trying to do the same thing. Instead of having wolves, we use electric, plastic wire that we put behind them, and then we call and move them to the next spot the next day. But yeah, they've been our saving grace this year, and so we hit these twice a year. We only have about maybe a third of our grazing acres are made up in native warm season grasses. We get about 36 days out of them, to be honest. It's not a lot, but what we do get out of them is amazing. They have 3 times the biomass of cool season grasses. And in a case study we did about 2 years ago, we found that we were able to get like right at 3 pounds a day gain on our steers as we moved them through the system. So they're a great grass, full of pollinators, promote wildlife. I would encourage anyone who's in a grazing system to maybe think about, incorporating some native warm season grasses. And then, yeah, how do we manage them? We burn them. We set them on fire. For thousands of years, they've co-evolved with fire. We have records of that from like old sludge ponds that we can do soil cores on to show that, around 5 to 6 thousand years ago, they were burnt in the summer based on lightning fires. And then people showed up and they started burning them in the spring, and they've kind of co-evolved to that. They're getting a lot of different nutrient exchanges through the burning. It's increasing phosphorus and potassium. It's igniting any legume seeds that are in there for nitrogen. And they perform really well on poor soils. And like we have at Catawba, we have very poor soils, but the grasses do good. So yeah, we set them on fire in the early spring, and then we burn them, maybe 3 5 years apart. Burning too frequently is going to kind of take away that wildlife aspect they have. But intermittent burns are healthy for the grasses. And so that's just an interesting way of doing it, like the people who've been here for thousands of years have done, the indigenous. And then we move back into the winter. And with our cool season grasses, I'm sorry if this is too much on grasses. That's really what I am very interested in. Kentucky 31, amazing grass. Love and hate it. In the summer, we're going to have, if we graze it down too low, we overgraze it, not managing it properly, we're going to, maybe experience some endophyte toxicities that come from it. But also in the wintertime, if I can graze it in August, September, I come behind the cows with a bush hog, I clip it, and then I let it grow to November. Stockpiling cool season forages, it's a very nutrient dense forage throughout the winter. And it kind of has the same effect if any of you have grown kale. Like when a kale gets a frost, it's going to send sugars up into its leaves to kind of protect it from the frost and keep it going. And fescue does the same thing. And so it sends sugars and carbohydrates up. It holds its green all through the winter. And we give them a little bit a day to maybe the same amount of biomass that we would feed a round bale to. And we just move an electric fence, and they can go as long as we have grass. And it depends on the winter, on the stockpile, if we had a dry fall, if we had a wet fall. Some years we've made it, least amount. We've made it all the way to March without feeding hay. We made it all the way to April without feeding hay, but this year we made it the entire year without feeding hay. I fed maybe 5 bales, and that was only because I keep young animals. They don't know how to dig in the snow to find the grass. And so you can see that on the right side that I rolled them out a bale of hay, so they couldn't figure out that the grass was underneath the snow. But this is our grazing plan for this year. If you're interested in this, I'd love to talk to anybody more about, setting up a grazing plan. But, we're able to, our blue lines are, permanent fencing. Our orange lines are permanent cross fences. And then our yellow line is how we're using polywire we call it, or temporary, electric fence through to move our cows. And with this, we're getting about, you know, on a herd of about 35 that we have now on 50 acres, we're getting about 2 days per paddock. But it's not prescriptive. We're going to change things up depending on drought, depending on where the good grass is. We're going to not stay in a prescription. We'll take them here, we'll take them there, and drive them around. And we move them so much that they're so used to it that they follow us. It's very easy, and we have very little problems. But in the end, this is what we're after. People say, you can't make a quality steak out of a grass-finished beef, and I tend to disagree. As you continue the system, as you build better forages, increasing the phytonutrient within your forages, incorporating trees and silvopasture, you're going to get, better quality grass that they're going to eat, and they're actually going to gain fat on them. So over here on the left, these are the first cows we did, and these are actually heifers. They weren't steers. Heifers tend to, fatten up a little bit better. But we still don't have quite the marbling we have here in these two steaks here. These are our last steers that we processed, and we'll process again here in the fall. But you can see significant amounts of higher fat content, a lot of more marbling going on. And I send these off to be graded, and we're grading right at the bottom line of choice right now, which is the grader that I send it to is like says he doesn't rarely see grass, fed finished beef look like that. And so, as I mentioned, where's our beef go? We work with this nonprofit, LEAP, Local Environmental Agriculture Project in Roanoke. They have a mobile market that goes to low-income neighborhoods that are considered food deserts within Roanoke City. And they put our beef on there, and then it's made accessible to people who wouldn't otherwise be able to purchase such a product. And they're able to use their SNAP and EBT for it as well. And also, I said, we sell some quarters, wholes, and halves to the community. One of the things that I'm most proud of is our bird population. So I've worked with the local bird club in Roanoke, and we've been over the last 3 years trying to catalog all the species of birds that we see. Birds are like an amazing indicator of ecosystem function, of a healthy ecosystem function on the landscape. And since we started, we've been able to catalog 114 different species of birds, which is just blows my mind. A lot of these are rare birds that aren't found anywhere in the area, and it's totally due to our agroforestry and grassland management. Anybody out there who's a beef producer, I won't go into this like super crazy, but just trying to promote it out a little bit. Virginia Tech, we're working in southern West Virginia, and we have a project, if you're a cattle grazer, on Climate Smart, that we have some opportunities for you if you want to try to make some improvements to your operation, and we have some money to support you. And so, yeah, it's called the Grasslands Partnership. We're comparing 6 different practices. We're actually trying to look at like how these practices work for carbon sequestration within the soil. Of the 6 practices, we're asking adopted farmers to try 3: improved grazing management. That just means a nice rotation, putting some legumes down, frost seeding some clovers, things like that. Incorporating native warm season grasses into your rotation, incorporating a silvopasture, looking at diversified field borders with different pollinators, and then maybe some applications of organic matters such as biochar or gypsum. So this is the one in West Virginia. We're calling it GRASS, Grazing for Appalachian Sustainability. It's going to have a marketing component to it as well for grass-finished beef within the region. So yeah, we're looking for 55 cattle producers in West Virginia. And then, we're cost sharing up to $20,000 per producer. You get $1,000 for your quarterly reporting, $2,000 if you're a mentor, $500 to participate in a grazing school, and then, help with marketing. So yeah, it kind of works like NRCS, if you ever worked in a cost share program there. You implement it, we pay you back essentially. So these are the emails for anybody who might be interested in this. A Fletcher and then Jay Fike, John Fike, he's the contact that I work with at Virginia Tech. And then our Catawba farm is a technical advisor. So if you have questions about any of the practices, we've done them all at the farm, and you'll talk to me, and I'll kind of tell you, I'll give you the truth on this works, this doesn't, this sucks, this doesn't, this is great, this isn't. So um, if you're interested in our farm, we are doing a number of grazing series. Our next one that we have on the books is for October 18th. And if you're familiar with the grazing world, Dr. Alan Williams is probably a pretty well-known name, and he'll be here to talk about soil health, adaptive stewardship, and ecosystem processes and how they affect herd epigenetics. So we'd love to have you there, and follow us on Facebook or our website to get more details on those programs. But other than that, that's a really nice picture of an overview of the farm. I love to see all the trees and the landscape and the diversity that's available there, and share it with everyone. And if you guys have any questions, I guess I'll take them now. Thank you all very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adam. That was such an interesting and informative presentation. I had no idea what a busy man you were. We do have a question here in the Q&A, and it is, have your new practices increased your tick population?
Probably. I feel like I've pulled more ticks off this year than I have, but I feel like that has to do with, we had a mild winter. We do have a lot of grasses. They didn't really get a good kill, but then again, we have a lot of birds out there eating them. But yeah, I would say when you create a landscape that is based on nature and not on ag production, you're going to promote biodiversity, and unfortunately, ticks are also part of that biodiversity.
Hey, Adam, this is Sarah. I've
Hey,
got a couple of
Sarah.
questions. Hey, hi. I've got a couple questions for you.
Yeah.
Number one, going back to your hay meadow, your like intercropped hay meadows. You specifically mentioned nitrogen fixing tree species or canopy species. What are you using as your nitrogen fixing canopy species?
Black locust primarily.
Okay.
And then on the shrubs, we're using false indigo and smooth alder.
Okay. And then are you in your silvopasture, or I guess it's actually it's what's currently your alley cropping site B. You said you're putting in tulip poplar, and then you also have tulip poplar in some of your silvopasture situations already in silvopasture production. Are you growing the tulip poplar as a canopy tree, or are you also allowing it to be coppiced if it happens to happen, or are you intentionally coppicing it at all?
We're just letting it happen if it's coppiced. The cows are pretty rough in the silvopasture system, the cows are the roughest on the tulip poplar. It's, for our cows, it's their favorite leaf
Sure.
to eat. And so, they'll actually like bend their neck around it, and, they've broken quite a few. In the alley cropping scenario, yeah, the same thing. We're, looking for the leaf matter for fodder once those, trees grow up. But tulip poplar also has like a good leaf mast. And so, it falling and working
Sure.
toward building soil nutrient was another goal of that. But yeah, also dropping some branches for the cows when they're big enough to get in there.
Sure. And I had another question, but I don't remember what it was. Sorry. I did not get it written down.
Aw, you'll think of
It might come back to me with other folks. I might. Well, I know how to ask you if I do.
Yeah,
Even if it's not tonight.
you get a hold of me.
So looks like we have answered all of the questions in the chat. Thanks, Sarah, for getting those links out there and in Q&A. So we'll give folks a few more minutes to get any questions that they may have either in the chat box or in the Q&A. Sarah, if you want to launch the exit poll while folks are thinking about any last minute things they want to ask Adam, that would be great. And I will remind everyone, our next webinar will be on Thursday, July 18th. We hope that you will be able to make it back here for that. And then in August, we will meet the fourth Thursday of the month because our team will be at the West Virginia State Fair. So just a few reminders while we are waiting for any last minute questions to come in. But thank you, Adam, so much for being here this evening. We appreciate your time, and thank you everyone for joining us. It was wonderful to have you here with us as we learned about what's happening down at the Catawba Sustainability Center. It was really cool.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me, and you know, please come visit anytime. Be happy to show you guys around to see it on the ground.
I remember my other question, Adam.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with chemical burns, what precautions are you taking for waterways? I mean, I know that where you were implementing that was not right on the creek, but I mean, what would you do in a situation where you were either closer to the creek, you didn't have the established riparian buffer that you have? Like what's your take on that situation?
You know, just for simple measurements, I would still stay at least 50 feet away from the creek. But also for us, I don't do it myself. I hire like trained professionals with like GPSs that like know that like on a computer system that they're spraying the right application that we've asked for the acreages that we're doing, so we're not overspraying. And it's being applied only once to the area that it's at, and you know, we're not hitting it twice. So that's kind of how I deal with it. I try to avoid it at all costs, but when it comes to, you know, changing a new ecosystem essentially that we need to for production, and then that's when I'll pull that tool out. But otherwise I don't use it at all.
I have uh what has turned into a healthy little crop of poison ivy in our orchard, and we are trying to I tried pretty aggressively with manual removal, and even with a Tyvek suit and gloves, I'm pretty allergic, and it was a rough period for a little while afterwards, and we're still seeing it come back so aggressively, and so I'm trying to navigate how I'm going to handle it in our orchard.
Yeah, I would be careful. And, you know, when I had to spray, so when I did the alfalfa, I had to spray a second time because of the Johnson grass. And I was very scared because of the 80-foot alleyways and the boom truck like that I hired, how far it could go because glyphosate can really mess up some trees. You know, I think for that, there's, you know, kind of natural methods. I don't know if you wanted to run some Freedom Rangers through there to eat and stamp and poop and
Do you find that effective with poison ivy specifically?
I do at my house. Yeah,
Okay,
we run chickens through our orchards, and we have poison ivy all on the fence lines, but nowhere near where the chickens have
cool.
been.
Well, that's good to know. Yeah, I mean, we've used goats outside of the orchard, but goats are dangerous in the orchard,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
as you know.
I tried chickens. Chickens are great at like smothering stuff out. They're really great tramplers if you get enough of them. And
Sure.
then that huge nitrogen load, you know, a lot of
Right.
stuff
Yeah.
can't handle it.
All right. Thanks, Adam.
Hmm.
All right, it doesn't look like we've had any other additional questions come in, so I think that we can safely wrap things up for the evening. Again, Adam, thank you so much for being here, answering all of our questions. We hope that you'll be able to join us again sometime. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. It was a pleasure having you, and we'll see you again next month.
All right. Thank you guys so much. It was a lot of fun.